We're going to talk about a problem with the Universe Beyond, and I feel like it's something that we should talk about because it is something that you specifically, but we together have opinions about the art side of things.
Right. So I think we're going to talk about a little bit about how making art for Magic works, not on the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of it, but more so on like what it's actually like to go do this work and then sort of have the career of being a Magic artist. And
the realities
of it, and then how Universe Beyond has kind of been shifting that a little bit in a direction that is quite a bit different from how historically it's worked.
And specifically not a great direction.
Distraction makers.
Before we can really talk about the Universe Beyond part of this, we have to sort of give context about how like being a freelance artist works. How being a freelance artist used to work, like back in the day, and how things have sort of changed over time. And also like how it compares to other creative fields, like being a musician or, I don't know, some other ones, a writer.
Sure.
Like being a writer.
One of the other artists.
Another art form. But yeah, like being a musician or being a writer.
Right.
And so, first let's talk about, the way that doing artwork now, specifically in the gaming space, works versus like how it used to work, say in like Frank Frazetta's time.
How it works now is pretty much everything is flat rate. You can go hourly rate, day rate, etc. But essentially you go and talk to a client reaches out to you, whichever, you negotiate whatever your rates are, depending on the item. Let's say it's an illustration. Most illustrations, it's going to be a flat fee. So you get paid your flat fee, you turn it in, they pay you around 30 days later, at most, hopefully in most cases, some cases it's 60 days later. Yeah,
it's called net 30 or net 60, which is negotiable in your contract. But yeah, it's
negotiable.
It depends on the client.
Yeah. And you essentially turn in the assignment, and it's pretty straightforward. It's become very commercialized. It's become
standardized.
Really, very standardized. Yeah. It's really not that glamorous.
This is where one of the biggest distinctions comes in with how things used to work. Is that currently everything is now work for hire, right? Which means that you do the art, you get paid for it once, and the company that paid you to do it now owns the work. They own the copyrights. It used to be that instead, you as the artist could own the copyrights. Again, this is something Frank Frazetta was famous for, is that he often would negotiate and say, I would like to own, like basically, I think at the time it was sort of like, I own the original. Yeah. And because he owns the original, he then owns the copyrights, which means that the entity, the business, whatever, that is commissioning him to do this art, they get to use the art in the way that it was intended to be used, which let's say it's a book cover. They commission him to do this book cover. He paints the art. It's on the book. They do the print run of the book. If they wanted to do another print run of that book, they would have to pay him again. He then gets like residuals. He gets royalties. He gets potentially a percentage of the book sales. Like there was a lot more negotiable aspects of this environment than there are now.
Right. And this is now, it's closer to what we still see with writers and with musicians on a higher scale, is that they will generally get paid royalties. You can't play you can't play a musician's songs without paying them a certain amount of money.
Famously on YouTube.
Right.
That's where the copyright strike stuff comes from.
Right. And similar with someone's writing, right? If a book gets printed, right, you have to pay the writer for that. And so artists somehow, visual artists, now this might be different in other sectors of art, but when it comes to commercial art, very commercialized art.
And also specifically in the gaming space, in book publishing still, there are more sort of lucrative contracts where artists still get to be paid royalties and those kinds of things. Those do exist.
Yeah. But in commercial game art, that's not really a thing.
It's all work for hire.
It might be a thing for very specific, a handful of people, and that's going to be something that they are able to negotiate because of their notoriety, but it's not common.
And that literally would be someone as popular as like Amano, like for the Final Fantasy stuff. We don't know what those contracts look like, but like in order to get somebody that's at that level, it theoretically could have been negotiated that way. But yeah, somebody like James Jean or something, right? Who has entered more into like the fine art space. Rebecca Gay as well is probably in this stage of her career. Is that she has sort of transitioned into more of this kind of fine art world where just her name being on a card holds some amount of notoriety. It's not to say that that's how her contract worked for doing the new Bitter Blossom Bearers for Magic. We don't know. It could have been also that like there was a favor thing going on there. Who knows, right? Because she's been doing Magic cards for so long that maybe there's probably something worked out there. So it's not that there aren't one-off contracts that might still kind of work this way, but generally speaking, the vast majority of Magic artists, including some of the best Magic artists that make some of the best work in Magic, all work this way. They get paid once, they get paid, and the Wizards now owns the copyright to the images.
Right. So what I'll say is that how it used to work when Magic first started is that it was still different from how, like you're saying, Frank Frazetta in the olden days kind of worked, is that generally you'd still get a flat rate, but you did receive royalties. How the royalties actually worked for Magic at that time, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if it's distributed per card, per set, whatever that works out to be, you know. And
a lot of this had to do with the fact that Magic didn't have any money at that point
sure,
in time.
yeah. So they had to promise artists royalties essentially to make up for the fact that they were paying them $100 to $200 or something like that per illustration. You could also at the time sell prints. I don't know if they did artist proofs at that time. They might have. And you could sell the originals. So while Wizards maintained the copyright, you could still sell the original paintings or sketches.
Yes. And what is an artist proof for people that might not understand?
Sure. Artist proofs are versions of cards that you've done, but with a little white back.
Oh, look who it is.
It's Dockside.
Is that the last one?
I think I have two.
Two left.
Maybe, yeah. Something like that.
If you want one.
No, they're not available.
Post Malone. If you want one. It's banned. Nobody wants it.
Yeah. So they're cards, version of cards that you get that cannot be played officially in tournaments or anything like that, but they have a white back, and so artists are able to do sketches, paintings, whatever on them, and sell them on the secondary market.
So it's a way for artists to get a bit more, get paid a bit more for the cards that they've done, considering the rates themselves are not great.
Right. I don't know what the rates were previously, but currently the rates are around $1,250 for a flat fee for most cards. If you're working on a legendary creature, I think it goes up to $1,750. And then I believe planeswalkers pay more. I don't know what the rate is, but I think it's around $2,500 or more.
That's kind of interesting. I kind of wonder if that's still the case now, even though because most people care about legendary creatures and the planeswalkers are kind of less popular now, I guess. Whatever.
The main difference between how Magic stuff works now versus how it originally worked is that artists don't get royalties anymore. And so if your card gets reprinted, they don't have to pay you anything else.
They do send you artist proofs.
They do send additional
artist proofs. They send you a
proofs.
Booster box.
That's true. I have gotten a couple of random booster boxes because my GOAT token happened to be printed coincidentally into another set.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a little bit of math on how long does it take you to, let's say you're spending an average amount of time to paint a Magic card. How much time do you think average it would take you to paint a Magic card? And you're relatively...
I'm pretty quick. So anywhere from 15 to 25 hours.
Okay. So we'll say 25 hours to paint a Magic card. Let's say you're getting paid $1,250 for that Magic card and it took you 25 hours. So $50 an hour, which sounds pretty good, right? So doing freelance work does not work the same way as getting paid per hour at a 40-hour-a-week job, right? Your hours are very sporadic. And so $50 an hour in a position where you don't know how many hours of work you're going to have for the week or for the month or whatever it is not great. It's okay.
I mean, if that's all you're doing, right, is one card or whatever, so you kind of
get $1,250 for the month if you get one card, right? And that's assuming you're getting one a month, which is
that's also not super likely. And I think this is also where it gets tricky, is that you have the capabilities of relying on Magic as being a career maker. There are people that decide that they are now a Magic artist and that is their career, and that you have the potential to do that because of the secondary market with Magic. And that's so different compared to any other commercial project. It's why there's still so many people that want to go and work for Magic, even if there's these other card games coming out, is because these other card games generally don't offer the same rights to artists, but on top of that, they just don't have the same level of secondary market because they haven't been around as long.
So do they typically pay more then because there's no extra way to make more money?
Some do.
Right. Depends on the client.
Right. But like Riot, I think was the only one that was really Riot and Valve, Artifact were the ones that like ended up paying more. But even Artifact let you sell originals and stuff. So, so the fact that you could kind of make this into a general career is very special about it, but it's kind of this like lottery system in a way. And so not only is it a lottery generally on like how many assignments that you might get in a given month, because cards go out in waves. So it's every 8 weeks or so, new cards are going to be going out. Yeah. And whether you get 1 or 5, is somewhat on how much you're willing to take on, but also how much they are going to send to you. So you can't totally rely on just them being your client if they don't send you as much.
You probably need other clients. Right. Except for these instances where the secondary market is kind of filling in the gaps. Right. Wizards also kind of limits an artist's ability to sell some types of products, right, with their artwork. They give them the ability to sell prints, right, many, and they can print their own prints to sell them. So prints often get sold at conventions. This was basically my independent artist career, was going around the country and selling specifically art prints and wall art, and I did that for 5 years until COVID. And Magic artists can do the same thing with the art that they make for Magic. So there's a bit more of like a perceived value potentially, especially if it's a very popular card, that you might be able to sell some prints of, right? But playmats don't work the same way.
Right. So there's exclusivity with Ultra Pro with Wizards. And so if you wanted your art printed on a playmat to go and sell secondary market or at shows or whatever, you have to go through Ultra Pro. And everything, I've personally not worked with them, but everything I've heard about working with them has been just about awful. Apparently it takes several months to even get playmats over to you. So as an example, I'm waiting to find out if I'm going to get into MagicCon Vegas in May. I can't order playmats right now for that because I can't guarantee that they could get here in time. So you'd have to order it basically for like 2 to 3 MagicCons ahead of time.
And then you need to store them and you're sitting on a bunch of inventory, and that turnover is like a huge problem because like you're paying Ultra Pro for those playmats, right?
You're paying for it and it's at a much higher rate.
Then on top of that, you then have to order a bunch of them because you don't know when you're going to be able to order them again. So you have tons of money sitting in inventory. This was a big problem, like with running a convention booth. It's like you want to be turning over this inventory. You don't want to be sitting on a ton of it that you're like, you just have a bunch of money sitting there in inventory instead of moving it. And so in order to make sure that you can have the playmats, you might have to order a year's worth of playmats at one given time. So
and
you
don't know how well they're going to sell. And I think that's the biggest thing is that like you don't know what cards to get playmats for. As a good example of this is I went to MagicCon Vegas last year, and that was my first time doing a MagicCon. And so I didn't totally know what to expect. I generally knew like, okay, Dockside Extortionist is popular. Seedborn Muse is going to do well. I had a third one. Hex Drinker might do okay it was modern viable for a little bit. Yeah. But Carrot Cake was actually the card that was like the second or third most popular. And I didn't realize it's just because so many people put it in their rabbit themed commander decks, but
it's like kind of a meme.
It's a bit of a meme, but it's also, I guess it saw a lot of play in limited for Bloomburrow. Yes. And I didn't realize I didn't do limited Bloomburrow, so I didn't know it was really popular in draft. Yeah. But like I would have never anticipated that.
And you're already there. Yeah. You wouldn't know that until you're there and then have missed out on those sales. And then you're like, well, I guess next time maybe you'll order some or something, and then maybe the fad has passed at that point and nobody cares anymore.
Or if that were Dockside, right? If I were doing and it got banned, then suddenly I'd be sitting on all that. So
those are some of the big risks there. Okay, so there's another aspect to the secondary market part of this, which is artists being able to sell their original paintings and preliminary drawings. Yeah. There's a huge market for this, a huge secondary market, and there's even like an artistic movement that has happened because of probably primarily magic art, because so much of it is commissioned that there has become sort of this collector base of people that want to collect these original, it's called fantastical realism, that people want to collect these original paintings. There's some really prominent artists, then some of them have even sort of transitioned into basically just making art for collectors. The whole original side of this is probably where artists are recuperating. Like that's where the artists are able to make a substantial amount of money that makes working for Magic at these pretty low rates seemingly worth it. It's not every artist that can get like a substantial payday from the originals though. No. It's like some artists are much more sought after. Someone like Chris Ron is highly sought after in this space and has sold his original paintings for tens of thousands of dollars. Confidently, we can say tens of thousands. Maybe
we can confidently say tens of thousands.
Maybe 100.
I'm pretty sure Tiamat sold for over 100, but I could be wrong. It might have been over 50.
Right. Okay. So, and that is a pretty substantial payday, right? But that is still a single one-time payment, and now that original is gone.
Yeah, I mean, I've always described doing Magic cards as like, it's like a lottery ticket because you don't know what it's going to be. When, like sometimes if you're doing a reprint, like I knew I was doing Seedborn Muse when I painted Seedborn Muse. So I knew like, oh, that's going to be like a card that's relevant. Okay. But like Dockside, I had no idea I was doing a card that was good. Hex Drinker, I had no idea.
Well, and you work mostly digitally, right? Like you'll do like preliminaries, sketches and things traditionally. But when you go to the painting side of it, and that's one of the reasons why, I shouldn't say why you can work so fast, but generally speaking, you can work faster digitally.
Sure.
But there are artists that do paint faster traditionally, but usually if you're doing like a Chris Ron level oil painting, like that's going to take a while. Like we're talking 40, 80 hours or whatever. There's a big investment of time that's put into those paintings. And the reason why they're able to make that investment is because they are pretty sure that there will be a payoff when they go to sell the original.
And I think that that's what a lot of artists are starting to key in on right now is that because we'll kind of, we'll talk about Universe Beyond here in a sec and sort of where that's taking the general direction of artists. But I think that what's happening is that artists are recognizing how they end up getting paid more is by leaning into the secondary market. And that if they wanted to turn this Magic artist's part of their career into a full career, they could do that. If they leaned into artist proofs, they lean into prints, they lean into the events, and they sell their originals, then they can make substantially more money if they decide to lean into that. But they really have to commit to Magic as their client, and that Magic enthusiasts, right, are their customers.
And also their ability to sell secondary market things.
Right. And so if you end up basically, like if I were to do I'm trying to think of a good card example. Okay, so my first two cards were Hex Drinker and then Dockside. After that, I knew I got a goat token and a bear token. So those first two cards, I would have never known if those were good. Then after the tokens, I would have thought, okay, probably not worth doing an original. But then if I got my next card and my first two cards were those that did that well, sure, I could have made the assumption like, well, maybe it's probably worth me investing doing a traditional painting in this.
Yeah. And then your third card was what?
I don't know. I don't even remember.
It was like a dog. Was it the dog?
It was one of the dogs.
The Alpine dog one?
I did like a horse and two dogs or whatever.
Yeah, like nobody.
Yeah, they're like limited.
There's like
play.
commons or whatever. Yeah.
And so like that would have gone terribly. Like I would have. Now that being said, I think most originals will usually end up selling still. If it's a fully painted original, is probably going to sell for at least $1,000.
It is about building a reputation, but you're doing it within kind of this walled garden a little bit, right? Which is Wizards of the Coast, and you're banking on like, okay, well, if I keep doing this, one day I might be Chris Ron, right? Like one day I might be able to sell my original paintings for tens of thousands of dollars or whatever. Yeah. But it's not a guarantee, right? And it depends on a lot on Wizards of the Coast. And so I think this finally brings us to the biggest problem here with artists and Universes Beyond. Yeah. And it's that this secondary market part of this, artists are being cut off from it. Yeah.
So the rules essentially with Universe Beyond is essentially that unlike with normal Magic cards, you will get paid more. So instead of $12.50 as a base fee, you get $3,000 as a flat rate, which is significantly higher. However, on the flip side is that you don't get artist proofs, you don't have the rights to sell prints, and you can't sell originals. And so now...
Not every Universe is Beyond, though, right?
That's
Didn't
true.
Marvel... I think Marvel let them sell originals, but that's mostly because Marvel does that with the comics.
Yeah, I believe Marvel, there is an exception. Yeah.
But basically that's it.
That's it. The reason that this is such a huge deal is because, and I'll keep going back to this as an example because I just think it makes me mad, honestly, when I hear about like how this ended up going down, is that the One Ring was such a hugely, insanely popular card, and it was illustrated by a couple different artists. For sure, Veli Nystrom did one, and then Martinale did another one. I think there's another version of it as well.
Right, there's a few different versions by different artists.
None of those artists were able to sell originals of that. And the originals, if those were done traditionally and sold traditionally, would have probably sold for $50,000+ dollars.
Oh, at least.
At least. And like they weren't even given the opportunity. And that's not mentioning like there's other artists that did work traditionally. There was like a traditional painting of Gandalf and like all of that would have sold incredibly well, but those artists weren't given the opportunity and they're not able to sell them now. And so the incentives that Universes Beyond has created is sort of incentivizing artists in the commercial space when you're knocking down all these potential benefits that Magic has created, is now pushing artists into the space that instead, like if I were working for them still, which I'm not, but if I were still working for them, I would be viewing it very much just as a paycheck, right? As like, this is now $3,000. And what happens when you reach that freelance stage where there's no other external incentives is that time is just money at that point. And so if I'm spending less time to get that finished product, then I'm making more money. Because there's no incentive for me to do extra well if I can't go and sell that thing elsewhere. Now, the incentive to do extra well would be, one, personal artistic integrity, which I think there's value in that, potentially. Two, future portfolio pieces.
Which but again, you could do without doing a Magic card, but yeah.
Sure.
You could double up, at least.
It's ironic because you'd be working really hard to make a portfolio piece that ideally would then be used to advertise yourself to a different client that's going to pay you better than Magic. So it's sort of just like, you're just using that like, as your way to get paid more. I can get paid
to do a portfolio piece and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but you don't own it. So like, let's say you do a portfolio piece, like I guess you can't, well, if it's Universe Beyond, you can't make playmats, you can't make prints, you can't do any of the stuff that you could do if you just made your own piece of art.
The other incentive is essentially if you really want to make Magic as a career work out, then you want Wizards to be happy with your work, right? Obviously, if you do really good with any work, including Universe Beyond, like Wizards is ideally going to hopefully reward you and give you more work in the future. Now, that is a little bit reliant somewhat on, what Wizards likes and whether they like your work and all that. And like, that's a little bit too much trust, I think, in people that I don't know and don't care enough probably about
also
like,
just
my
like
interests.
You just don't have enough control over it, right? Like it to me, this is part of like selling a dream a little bit, right? Like Wizards is selling a dream, right? There's a lot of people that want to be artists. There's a lot of people that can paint to a level that Magic would hire them, which is part of why the rates are depressed. The rates are what they are. But the flip side of this is there is a upper echelon of artists who are extremely skilled, and they do Magic art because there's it makes sense to be able to spend the amount of time that they need to spend to make something look incredible, because they can get these residuals on the back end that normally previously would have been handled through the royalties and things. And then maybe you get an original on top of it and stuff too, right? Like you can be, not necessarily like filthy stinking rich, but like you were pretty well off, right? You were able to, have a more than, poverty level income in some of these cases, right? Like,
I mean, what, by selling originals?
Yeah, no, I mean like previously, like, and really the biggest part of this is like building on top of like creating assets for yourself and building on top of the things that you're making and building yourself long-term value in what you're doing.
Yeah, because I don't think enough people consider that if you're doing an original painting, that is an asset that can potentially appreciate in value. And in most cases, especially depending on what it's associated with, will appreciate in value.
Well, and it's also the rights to the images, right? It's not just the original painting. Like the original paintings, yeah, I'm sure Chris Ron is holding on to some that he eventually will sell later. But like, I just keep coming back to Chris Ron as the example, but
He's a good example.
There's plenty of other artists that
He's really handsome too.
Is he?
I think so.
Oh,
he's a good looking guy.
Yeah. My point being that like, you are giving up a lot as an artist to do this stuff that in a Universes Beyond centric world, the payoff is basically just not there, right? It is instead turned into just a transaction of I'm getting paid X amount of dollars, 3,000 to do this piece of art, and that's the end of it. And so in order for me to make enough money to sustain myself, if I'm doing, I don't know, a handful of these a month or every 2 months or whatever, like if I want to make, let's say 100,000 a year, like you're basically like, I got to get these things done quickly. I can't spend the amount of time that I normally would be spending on these because I can't get those other payoffs anymore.
Right. I mean, that is essentially what it comes down to, is that it's not to say that you can't still make a decent living off of this, especially if you're given consistently enough cards. But yeah, it really is just, you got to get those cards done quickly, because now your quality can't equal more money, essentially.
Right, exactly. The incentive for quality is no longer there.
Right. And outside of, again, you need to be hireable.
Sure.
Right.
But I think in terms of like where players would feel this, it's that. Where this affects players is that the incentive for the top tier quality art starts to diminish because you're just getting paid the once. There's not the incentive to make the best quality image you can, knowing that you can sell that original later, because you can't sell the original at all. So the other part of this is that we kind of have to ask ourselves, in this world where Final Fantasy is doing the kinds of numbers that it has done, and if they're paying $3,000 a card in Final Fantasy, how do you justify that rate when you've made $200 million in a day? Back several decades ago, sure, but like back, 1950, it was, you did the image, you own the image, you've licensed it, you're getting residuals, you're getting royalties, just like musicians get today. Like when Mariah Carey, she sings her Christmas song.
Sure.
She's set for life.
We're talking about Chris Ron and Mariah Carey.
I mean, like, literally, that's what's weird, right? It continues to drive artists to an independent perspective, which that's me, right? I made that decision a long time ago where I was like, I was mentoring with Pete Moorbacher, and he's a former Magic artist, and he was on the same path. I want to do Magic cards. That's my goal. And not only did he help me realize that like the art style that came naturally to me doesn't really fit in Magic anyway, but also that like, grass isn't always greener over there. And so opening my eyes to the fact that like there's a whole alternative path here that doesn't even involve doing this, all this work that I end up selling to a company that now owns it, and I get nothing afterward. And so that's been my perspective for years. And I'm sort of glad in some ways to see artists start to also see that, but like it sucks that Magic was one of the avenues to some of that, and Universes Beyond starts to close the door on it.
I think that's why it's important to talk about this now, is because I'm seeing behind closed doors and stuff, like this is the direction that Universes Beyond is sort of forcing artists to kind of go in. What's unfortunate is that Magic was that sort of pillar for artists for such a long time, and was the standout in commercialized game art industry, because they were allowing that avenue for artists to make a career out of that.
They were helping to enable that avenue, and they were benefiting massively from it. Yeah. And I think this mutually beneficial relationship was like part of the deal.
Yeah. And it's not to say that relationship isn't still there, but this is the warning, basically, right? This is the red flag being raised up, saying like, hey, if this keeps going in this direction, it's not just that this is Universe Beyond. This could potentially become normalized across Magic sets. We're also just paying for the rights to be able to even go and sell our stuff amongst other people.
So yeah, don't even get me started on the fact that they were giving booths away at the conventions, like that you were an invited guest, and then it became you have to buy your own booth at these conventions. Kidding me? Sorry, whatever. So the reason why the secondary market stuff is locked out of Universes Beyond stuff is because it would have to be negotiated as part of the licensing deal for the artist to be able to sell this stuff. And that's a choice, right? Like Wizards of the Coast could choose to negotiate on behalf of the artists so that they could sell the originals. My assumption is that price of them being able to do that is substantially higher than the extra amount that they're paying artists. And they're basically just saying like, well, the calculation is that we're going to pay artists a bit more, and they're not going to be able to do any of the secondary market stuff because it would cost us too much money.
Right. Even though I actually think the trade-off would be in artists' favor if artists got paid less, but were allowed to do the secondary market.
I agree.
Now, that being said, unfortunately, it's always still a lottery ticket. However, it's like a lottery ticket that slowly trickles into a breadth of work that builds a career. I like to think of like looking at Jesper Eising when he first started on Lorwyn. Like Jesper was kind of a relatively unknown artist at that time and had just this unique style that ended up working really well for Lorwyn, and that players seemed to really like. And he slowly built that career from there, right? By building the work off of that and then eventually becoming just like a general Magic artist. And everyone has that sort of opportunity, right? They can take their work and they can stand out in that way and build a career and be known as that artist starting from that. So even if you don't get a hit right away, right? You don't get a rare or a mythic or a legendary that's relevant or anything. Like by building up that resume essentially of art, like you can still build that career and that trajectory.
Final thing about Magic generally as a positive is that Magic has been quite open about allowing artists to experiment with style, and depending on the set. But like their sort of style parameters has been pretty loose compared to other card games or other particular companies that want a very specific style. But Universes Beyond takes some of that away.
That's true.
They need you to operate much more within the likeness of the characters. Something like Disney's Lorcana comes to mind because they need to be like on model. You have to be very specific to the style. Be like Disney, it's very controlled by sort of that Disney copyright team saying, yep, that looks good. Universe Beyond sets by and large are going to be more homogenous to art styles that are on model, less experimental, less unique artist voices, no chance to be building any kind of the secondary market notoriety.
A good example is like I really tried to push the boundaries when I did Spider-Punk.
Yeah.
But was kind of told like, no, I can't do these things. Like I wanted to have the card ripping, and tearing. I wanted to have Spider-Punk kicking the card open and stuff like that.
And they were
I had like magic text of cards referencing chaos and anarchy in the background and stuff like that. And like they said that they really liked that idea, but for Universe Beyond, they were like, that's a no-go. And so, it's unfortunate that like there's these limitations that are sort of put on you working on these other IPs because it ends up then stifling, I think, a lot of the times your artistic expression and creativity of how you'd even want to handle these cards.
Right. Is there anything players can do in this instance, or is this more just like hey, we see what's going on and we just want to say that we see what's happening?
Support original Magic artists. I think that's pretty much all it can be. Is that I'm not saying you have to go and start being a collector and buying originals, although I'm sure Magic artists would appreciate that. But
artist proofs are a good.
Artist proofs are great. Yeah, artist proofs are a great way to start. I mean, just going and if an artist can go and like make their own original stuff for Magic that's not related to Universe Beyond and stuff like that, going and showing a little extra support for that, I think goes a long way. If you enjoyed listening to us talk about the plights of Magic artists, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
If you want to continue the conversation, you can join the Discord. Links in the description. Support your Magic artists.
Go support your Magic artists. Go tell them hi and that you love them.
Yes. Also, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Bye.